hope you're well. A very warm welcome to the Lahore Literary Festival. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Varda and I'm very pleased to be here in conversation with TJ Cin about her work and in particular about her new book, Keeping the House. TJ Cin is an author and an interdisciplinary artist from North London. TJ is a London Writers' Award winner. Her work has been published by Extra Teeth and Skin Deep and commissioned by several places, including St. Paul's Cathedral. Her first novel, Keeping the House, was published in 2021. How are you, TJ?
I'm great, thank you. It's so lovely to be with you today. And yeah, it feels an extra special opportunity seeing as we're speaking across waters.
Thank you so much for making time to speak to us. It's lovely speaking to you too. So to begin with, I would like to ask you about your new novel. And since you also create digital art and you are an interdisciplinary artist, how does that inform your writing?
I see everything as a form of storytelling, and sometimes where my novel might not have helped me to reach the full storytelling ability of a particular topic, I might need to move over to another form. So with my digital art, I find that helpful in terms of experimenting with technology and asking myself questions of what it is that I can learn quickly. I think for me, digital art offers that as an opportunity. I also, I think the two of my art forms that are most closely connected are probably my poetry writing and my music making, because often you'll find the two end up within each other. So if I write a song, it may, some verses from it may end up in one of my poems or even in Keeping the House itself, and then vice versa as well. So there's an album coming out for Keeping the House soon, and it's threaded through with quotes from the book and point of view songs written from the perspective of different characters in the book and things like this. I think an interdisciplinary approach is a way for somebody to stretch out beyond expectations of what their story could do in one moment.
Absolutely, and we see a little bit of that in the book, like you said, in Keeping the House, the poetry and the lyrical composition. It's really it really enriches the book. So that's really nice. So on that note, TJ, I would like to request you to read a few passages that you like in particular from the book and share those with us.
I'm going to read a passage from the perspective about a single mother that goes to visit her baby father in prison. And this is I think it's exactly at the halfway mark of the book. You may hear my cat in the background crunching on biscuits. Beware. Caledonian Road, same day. Assigned sectioning off legal visits and social visits is the first piece of signage that you see when you approach the prison visitors centre. After this, a parking sign. It refers to this building as an establishment, and it is indeed an establishment in the sense that it seems to be part of a wider construct, housing many who are anti-establishment. It is a system organized by many, by law, but that's where the term falls loose, because today it is out of kilter with similar centres in the area. There has been a parking disaster. Neither the Crown nor any servant or agents of the Crown are to be held liable for any losses or damages to the cars in this lot. This is particularly frustrating for those who have driven to visit their loved ones today and have left their cars at their own risk. When leaving the car at their own risk, drivers don't imagine a distressed pensioner smashing every windscreen with a plastic bag full of tinned goods. The tins don't do much damage, but she is persistent until she's stopped. As Ayla approaches the visitor center with her 3 children, she admires the woman's tenacity and spirit. Ayla has taken the kids with the bus today, and for the first time, this feels like the superior option. Generally, security is decent around these parts, but law enforcement is slow when the particular assailant that they have to immobilize is a small Irish woman with a loose wig and a weaponized quick-safe bag. Ayla thinks to herself that she's safe because it is a woman and not a man, and walks ahead to the entrance of the centre. Upon arrival, she signs in and gives in her pass from her previous visit to get through to the waiting area. The kids ask for sweets from the canteen and books from the play area. To the officers in the window booth, she gives magazines, £30, and tracksuit bottoms. Inside, everyone's fighting to the front of the queue to get their visitor pass before they run out. There are never enough passes. The kids in the room watch their families get jostled. When they're called in, they look for where he is, one of many men seated at a table and waiting for his family. Ayla is surprised again to see him without his curls. He has gone for a close crop, so his children are disappointed by him before he's even hugged them or spoken to them. They accuse him of doing this big shave without their prior knowledge, and it is as though he has broken a pact with them, especially Ipek, who cares about her dad's hair very much. Until this moment, she had been using it to remember him by, and now she will have to focus on his nose or some other thing that hadn't quite struck her the same way. He still smells like old Horborn though. Ipek tries to sit on his lap. He tells her that she needs to sit as if she is riding a horse sideways, like a lady. Without his hair combed through with oil, there is less oomph to him than Ayla is used to. She's happy to see he's gained weight, but sad to see that prison food has done most of the hard work here. Erhan, come closer. You know, you have big hands, little king. Who'd you get that from, do you think? He holds his hands up to his sons. They swamp them, but to Erhan, for a brief moment as he moves his hands forward, they look the same size. Ipek tries to push her hand in between so she can join in. Damla notices a gesture from her mum and takes the 2 over to a bead maze in the corner, where they push blocks along a looping path. How's your mum? Ayla responds by gesturing towards the children. It's like she's lost her voice. I'm worried kids are going to make her more scared. She keeps having nightmares, but they frighten her too sometimes. Send her good health from me, if she'll accept it. Probably not. She makes him laugh and misses him more because of this. It's almost easier when he's angry and therefore less the man she misses. Anyway, I'm going to send my friends to you. When they come, they'll take what I've got back at yours and they'll make everything clean again, okay? This is what I wanted to talk to you about. Okay, go on. They tried to speak in codes. You remember Ali? We spoke. He came to me and he offered to help shift the shopping for us. So I said, yes, please. Why are you letting him touch my shopping for? The plan is to sell your shopping through different routes. Then he takes a cut of the profits and everyone is happy. Leaning forward to whisper more, Ayla drops her volume. He's even got me in touch with that Kurdish boy, Aj, who tells me their bubble is very interested in my ideas. The cabbage one too. It's like you're not even thinking of the kid's future. Why would you even risk doing something yourself? So how does this work out step by step? What are you seeing? I help Ali with some cabbage plants and he helps me shift the shopping. Simple. This is me thinking future. He holds her hands across the table like a nurse, placating a patient. Ayla, running a vegetable shop on Lordship Lane and dealing with vegetables are different. There's two things I fear right now. I fear God and I fear you with your plans. I can't get to you. You're not communicating with me. I've just been trying to do what's best. There's no training for this. I can't send you a letter by budgie. What can I say? You did this. On her way out with the kids at her sides, Ayla gets stopped and checked again.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, TJ. This was one of those bits that I remember from the book when I was reading it. It's quite striking because it's quite refreshing to see women taking the lead in the plot of the book. And this book, I mean, there are emotional bits, and sometimes it kind of like reads like crime fiction, also some parts of it. And so that's really interesting, and that's something that I want to expand on, the women in the book, and them being at the center. Was this a conscious choice, and why is that important to you personally as an author?
I think it was both conscious and subconscious, including women at front and center, because I saw an opportunity to tell a story of the North London heroin trade through the intricacies of it, and the reality that people come home and they talk and they plan and they scheme, and who do they do that with but each other? You know, it's how could women not be part of that story, and why do we not see them within those stories at all? But then when I write womanhood, I think I write it from a perspective of feeling different to some women in the Turkish community and Turkish Cypriot community. And I seek those women out in my stories too, the women who subvert the rules of their societies and translate their own feminisms in ways that are perhaps less expected. If we can't platform those women, then who else will be telling their stories?
Absolutely, that's very, very true. So expanding on that further, and talking about representation within the book, and as an author, how do you like navigate that? Since the book is set in the Turkish community in North London, so how do you make sure that as an author, and during the process of writing the book also, how did you do justice to your writing, but also at the same time um, made sure that you were doing justice to the people that you were writing about, and it was representative in terms of the small rituals or traditions of that community also?
I love that question. I think for me, representing your community means knowing that you can't fully represent your community. We are just one person, one writer, one critic, one musician. But what we can do our best. I think the best practice for me is consent and finding a way to involve the community in how I tell my stories. So keeping the houses formed through interviews that are fictionalized, heavily fictionalized, but just to get I think I wanted to have an awareness of the North London heroin trade, for example, that was as thorough as possible before I began talking about the way that Turkish and Turkish Cypriot communities in particular are involved within that apparatus. And for me, that felt like research. That felt like everything that happened before my pen touched paper. And then afterwards, just knowing that you must protect your community when you're speaking about them, to allow room for nuance, and nuance in terms of when we speak about them, just to remind people that this is fiction, and also that it's an ongoing story, it's an ongoing quest. The book has gone to print and it's in people's hands or on their e-readers and so on and so forth, but it's still mutating and changing and evolving. And I'm curious, I want to hear the community's thoughts on the book, and I want to take those thoughts on board. And then book 2 will echo those things, I think.
So we'll come back to book 2 in a bit. But I want to ask a little bit more about the process. You mentioned interviewing and fictionalizing the accounts for the plot and for the book. So what was that process like, and how forthcoming are people when it comes to giving consent? Because, like you said, that's also very, very important. How forthcoming are they with information or with narrating their own experiences when they know that it's going to make its way into a book, even if it is fictionalized? So how do you go about that?
I think it involved a lot of trust. So I didn't just pop up out of nowhere with this story. I am so embedded into these communities, but as like they see me washing the dishes, they never think of me as writing. And when it came to me saying, actually, I'm a writer, this is what I do, it took a transformation of the way that my community viewed me to then take me seriously, and to then realize, like, all these stories, all these things that we lived through, like, maybe in their minds they felt it wasn't going to waste because they had someone to hear them. I think a lot of people just want to be heard, and when I was given any information, I would always say, like, I'm gonna read this back to you how I've translated it onto the page. If you see yourself in it still, let me know, and I'll cover your tracks even more. And so that's what we were doing. We were making sure everything was thorough, and I kept my group of people that were informing particular passages very separate to each other. So, for example, even time-wise, like the timelines, the people that were involved in the sections that were set in 1999, they weren't helping me with the later sections that were set in 2012. I think that really helped me. Another thing that I found really helpful was bringing up people for trivial information and not really telling them why I needed it. Just like, in theory, how much would your truck be able to hold? How many crates? And then they'd tell me and I'd get the measurement, things like this.
That's really, really interesting to know. So TJ, between starting from the conception of the book to actually the book going into print, how long was the process? And how was the conception of the book like? If you can walk us through a little bit of what went on behind the scenes as you were writing the book.
This story feels different to me every time I think about it, because it's like, this book has been many, many years in the making, lived in my head for a long time. And I think it's important that people always remember that with anything that's made. Even like a great love story, often it begins before the first kiss, right? So I see that like this book. Technically, I started writing it towards the end of my master's degree. I was at UCL, and we had a module on writing about the city. And a lot of the stories that I was reading that wrote about cities were, I think they were missing my city, my version of my city. We were reading Calvino and Zadie Smith, and we were reading other really great writers. And meanwhile, I was also reading books that Sangeeta Bandyopadhyay, who's one of my favorite writers. I think the way she writes about cities is amazing. But I didn't see my city, so I thought, I'm inspired by these writers, I'd like to do the same. And so I started to write Keeping the House. But it was hard. I didn't have the money to finish it. I didn't have the money to not use every waking moment really to either support my family or, there wasn't any time in the day really to get to the end. So it was like much slower than it needed to be. And then I won a place on this program called London Writers Awards. And through that, they supported me to get a laptop so I could write on the laptop. And that sped things along a lot. I didn't have to go to the library anymore. And then they also paid for me to go on a writing retreat. And that was 1 week. They sent me on 2. And on the second one of this 1 week retreat, I met my editor, Max Porter, and he gave me loads of advice in terms of like how to get the book through to the finishing line. By the end of the week, my book was finished, and we were more or less finished. And I got back, my agent sent it out to a publisher, and we had a lot of interest, but the publisher that I went with were the one who said, we know you worked with Max on this retreat. How would you feel if he was your editor? And I was like, well, definitely, of course, yeah. Like, I'll go with you, because if Max can be my editor, he's such an artistic influence for me. I felt it was really important to have an editor who understood crossover between poetry and prose, and that's something that Max does really well. And I think, yeah, it was a labor of like it was a gentle labor. Very slowly came through. And I held the book in my hands at 25. I started it at 21.
Quite remarkable. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
TJ, I also want to know, particularly about this book, but also like largely about your work, in terms of, you know, your writing and your art. How much do you think is inspired by your own imagination, and is the work of your own imagination? And how much is observation of people and of things and of situations around you?
There's this great Toni Morrison quote that's like, I can't remember it verbatim, but it's about the idea of, you know, if you've got so much imagination, why not use that? Why would you farm the everyday when you can go to this other place that you have here? I want to be like that all the time, but then I love observing. Because I realized that the way I observe the world is weird, and it was frowned upon. I was told off for daydreaming in school, and whenever I was watching a movie with friends, they would start laughing at the thing that I would be like, oh, that's really depressing. And or vice versa, I'd laugh at an inopportune moment. And so I think a large part of my work is filled with observations that are like strange observations, uncanny observations. And through that, I love doing that with my characters, because it will be me looking at, they always say every character has to have a quirk. And once somebody told me that, you know, you always give your character one thing, like a repeating gesture that they'll have, or one phrase that makes them who they are. And I always love looking at that in people. You know, I've got an uncle, for example, who always he'll always have a pocket knife, and he'll always be peeling a vegetable at some point, and I know what he's doing. He's always peeling something, and that's how I know him. And I think it's really great to bring that to life with your stories.
Absolutely, and I think that adds such a natural human touch to the characters, and offers a lot in terms of, you know, the relatability also, not just with you when you're reading it, but also you might spot that quirk in people you know, and it just enriches the whole experience of reading the book. And yeah, and that's definitely the case with Keeping the House.
Thank you so much.
So coming back to the book, it is now a cult classic. So how have things been for you after the success of the book? And you spoke about, you know, the second book. So do you have any exciting book projects coming up?
I feel very, very grateful with this book reaching readers, because it was an uphill battle for us. We were an independent press and other stories, small team, limited marketing budget, and you know, I'm a woman from an ethnic minority in London. I'm Turkish Cypriot, and I'm writing from about a very, it's not a coffee table book in terms of the subject matter. It's North London heroin trade, community isolation, but also women at the forefront and centre. So that's a hard sell and a hard pitch. I feel really grateful that first writers started coming on board who'd read the book and really supported it. Derek Ols, who's one of my favourite writers, he's also from Tottenham, and Caleb Azuma Nelson. He's another writer that came and supported the book. And I guess his lens was upon the romance within keeping the house. And the same with Selena Godin. She's a poet, and so she supported the book with that type of lens upon her reading. And slowly it grew into one writing it on, then it reached the readers, and then it reached the magazines and the print publications that reviewed it. And I think review culture is really important to support. It makes a huge difference. And now the book's being longlisted for prizes and shortlisted for prizes. It's like another way of reaching readers, which is beautiful. Book 2 is it's in the works. I'm hoping to go away for 1 month. I've applied for a grant to go and finish it in the setting of where it's set, but I won't say where just yet. And it's really hard. It's hard writing book 2 because I hear everyone's voices in my head now of what they liked about keeping the house. And it's going to be different to keeping the house because it's another baby. So it's like trying to work out how to treat it as an individual and not as like the less loved second child.
That's quite intriguing, and we wish you the best of luck with the second book. And those of us those who are listening to us, if you haven't read the first book, this is your sign, because the second book is going to come out soon, hopefully.
Thank you so much.
TJ, we're coming towards the end of the session. So before we end the session, I want to ask you about the best piece of writing advice that you've received and that you would like to share with us.
The best piece of writing advice that I've been given is give yourself permission to write fully, to just do what you want to write. Don't edit in your head. Get it on the paper. Write it and note it down with a dictaphone, anything. Just give yourself the opportunity to see that looking back at you, because that's a very special thing, to not censor yourself. You can do that later. You can do that once you reach other people, once you have an editor in place. But for now, tell the story you want to tell, because that's always a gift you can give yourself, that somehow you archived this for.
I think that's excellent advice. And on that note, we will close the session. Thank you so much, TJ, for making time to speak to us.